Here is one from Johannes, who's writing from Germany. For some members of a church's apologetic meetings, publicly talking about doubts and core questions seems very important and essential. For others, these same discussions are more confusing and sometimes even doubt-inducing. How can one deal with this in a proper way?
This is a really important thing to talk about. And I think, now I'm presuming that Johannes has had some attempts at doing group things where people express doubts and has had mixed responses. Sometimes this works out fine and sometimes it just increases doubt. So I'm just going on that assumption. By the way, I think these kinds of sessions are fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. One of the big reasons young people are deconstructing, which means they're being encouraged to take a look at everything they believe and to doubt it. And then this leads frequently to deconversion, then they go elsewhere, is because people aren't answering their questions. And it's madness to me when I hear young people say, well, I've asked questions and I'm just told to be quiet. Don't ask those questions, just have faith, or something like that. It's hard to know how thoroughgoing that pattern is, but I certainly have heard about it a lot. It's the worst thing you can do, in my view. Well, what if we don't know the answers, someone might say, and that just increases doubt if we can't give answers. Oh, I get that. You got to get the answers. This is part of discipleship. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have them at the top of your head, that you got to be spouting them all off, because I can't even do that with everything. Amy can, but I can't. So here's what I suggest for those times where questions are asked. And that is, if you have like a weekly session, when people ask questions, if there are questions that the person who's doing the answering does not have the resources to answer, if it is left alone, can't answer that, then that's an opportunity for doubt. The person who answers the questions with doubt doesn't have his doubt resolved, and those who weren't thinking about that question, now it's bothering them. The antidote is that the person who's in charge of answering the questions has a whole week now to go back and figure out the answer to that question. And the resources are abundant. They're a mouse click away, literally. And if you go to str.org, it's a good place to start, because there's hardly anything that has been a challenge to Christianity that one of our team members has not addressed well. And we are just one player in a massive field of Christian workers. We have a deep bench. So this is able to be resolved. So have your Q&A sessions. Answer what you can well, and what you can't answer well, pick it up. Okay, next week we're going to come back to this thing because I don't have the goods yet. And then get the goods, and then come back and start out your next session. Here are the three things, whatever it is, that I was not able to give a good answer for last week. But here is the thought I have now based on my research. And so if you do it that way, it gives the people freedom to ask whatever questions they want, get some answers. Questions that aren't answered immediately because it's just out of the scope of the person answering the question to deal with can be answered the following week or so when that person has some time to do some research. So it seems to me that's the best of both worlds.
That's a good idea, Greg. I think if you want even more control over what is being put out there, because obviously the more things that are put out there that you can't answer, the more doubts people are going to have over that week. Even if you have an answer, you might not be able to get to everything. What you could do is have people submit the questions in advance. They could email you, or they could text you as you're sitting there in real time. You could take a look, answer the ones that you can answer then, and then just do this as a regular event. So they know that there will be another time where they'll have their question answered, but that way you can prepare ahead of time. You're not going to be blindsided by something you don't know. You can work your way methodically through the questions, but you don't bring up things that you can't answer in the moment.
That's good. That's a good point.
I think there are a lot of ways to do it. And you also can – it depends on who your audience is. Maybe you have some who really don't know anything about apologetics and they're maybe very fragile and don't have a lot of trust that there are answers out there. So you can adjust this in terms of how mature and knowledgeable the people in your class already are. Because if they already have a foundation of apologetics, then if they hear something they don't know about, they're not likely to panic. They probably will just say, oh, that's an interesting question, and they'll have the patience for it. So I think you kind of need to evaluate and have a sense of who your people are and where they are, and just control how much gets out there that is not yet answered.
Amy, let me offer just a little tweak on your suggestion, which I think is really great. And actually, when I do Q&As with audiences in a church, oftentimes this is the way it's done. On cards, pastor reads off the question, or people text it in or something. There's a small liability with not being able to engage the person who's asking the question, and that is when there are ambiguities in the question. Of course, most people know that the first step of the game plan, tactical game plan, is to gather information, and you do that with a question, what do you mean by that? So when there are questions that are asked, lots of times there's ambiguities in the question. I actually like working with the individual to be able to clarify. So if it turns out you're reading a card from somebody in the audience, and then you say, okay, well, I'm not sure about this. Who is it that raised this question? Because I have a clarification question for you. Okay. Oh, okay, Bob. Yeah. Let me ask you about this. When you said this, what did you mean this, or did you mean this other thing here? And so there's a little engagement that's involved that helps you to clarify some things if necessary, but it also allows you to manage which questions you deal with at any particular time, which is what you had suggested. Good job.
And as long as you do this regularly, you can work methodically through all these questions, and people will be patient, I'm sure.